Okay, this is the Saturday Vancouver meeting of the LaRouche movement. It is June 9th, Saturday, and if you want to hear the full presentation and the questions, you need to come to the meeting. And you need to find out where the meeting is in Vancouver. You need to email me or talk to somebody who's been at the meeting. You can email me at Glumaz, Glumaz, @gmail.com. Okay, so tonight I'm going to deal with a very controversial topic, a topic that most people have extreme difficulties with. It's the topic of time. And this is a very important topic right now because people have a sense of time which is based on calendrical events when the real world is operating on a very different time. And in terms of calendar events, you have the U.S. election a little less than 5 months away. And you have the Democratic Convention, where it is expected that Obama will be anointed the candidate for the Democrats in a little bit less than 2 months away, perhaps 2 months away. That's a calendar time, otherwise known as clock time. Okay? Now, however, there's a different time which is creeping up very rapidly and is about to overtake the calendar time, and that is events, seismic events that disrupt all timetables, all calendar events. And that event is the systemic breakdown of the transatlantic financial system, and it's occurring now. And it's accelerating. Now, there is an absolute deafening silence over the situation that exists in the Obama camp and in the Romney camp. There's a deafening silence over the reality of the economic disintegration and the end of the existing financial system. Now, American electoral campaigns are long. They take a long time to build up. And by the time you reach this stage, you have an army of consultants and paid, corrupted politicians all lining up behind one or the other. Okay? And this army starts to grow exponentially as you go into the nominating conventions, and then it really takes off after the nominating convention. And these armies consume hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in advertising and under the table drug money, and it's a wild. It might be one of the largest service industries in the world. But anyhow, you have these two massive armies being geared up to go into the election process, and so these two immense camps are going into battle without checking the weather forecast. And the biggest financial storm in world history will sweep these millions into disarray, which is now getting started. That process is now getting started. And they have nothing to say about it, and will not have anything to say about it. And that's the kind of situation that we're going into. And I'll come back to this in showing you what you didn't hear about in the United States that's going on. Now, the financial storm is not centered in Europe. it is centered in the entire transatlantic system, and the European part of it is the trigger at this moment. But it's not Europe, it's the entire transatlantic system which is going to go under financially. Now, I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Okay, you have a European country, name Greece or Spain or Italy or France or Germany, and let us say that the demands on those governments to cut their population's living standards is so great that it is politically incapable of doing so, as we saw in the Greek situation, or as we partly saw in the French situation. The pressure becomes one of how do we get out of this situation where we have to continually cut our population to the bone and thereby create unrest and instability in our population. Or if we stay with the system and they go to the super bailout and you end up with the destruction of the currency through hyperinflation, it's the same result. Well, because the European nations are not a political union as yet, they are partly a political union, they don't have a Federal Reserve that they all subscribe to. They all have their own banks, they all have, and yet they have the common currency. So they have no way to bail out the banks except by governments actually buying up the issuing bonds to raise money to bail out the banks. So what the big fight in Europe right now is to get these governments to agree to set up the equivalent of a Federal Reserve, and that means eliminating whatever sovereignty they have under a super fund, which then goes into a bailout without having to resort, the way the Federal Reserve bails things out, without having to resort to decisions that governments make. So that's what they're trying to do. Okay, but even if they succeed in doing that, it's not possible to do the bailout because the trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of fictitious financial assets cannot be sustained. And right now you have, these assets are growing. All the bailout does is it increases these assets. It increases the leverage of these assets, it increases the debt. And then you have to go into more bailout and it increases the debt more. So you're coming to a point where the rate of collapse of the value, the rate of collapse is greater than the rate of bailout that is possible. You're reaching that hyperbolic kind of situation. So, now you have to imagine to yourself a country like Greece or Spain or let's say Germany, and they're saying, well, you know, we could dump the euro and go back to our currency we had before. The Greeks could go back to the drachma, no problem. You're a Greek, you live in Greece, you have a bank account in Greece. You just, at such a day, you convert your euros into drachmas. Not a problem. Now you're using drachmas, not euros. But there's a problem. What about all of the non-national financial speculative instruments that are denominated in euros? Who's going to convert them into drachmas or into marks or into francs or into pesetas or into liras? Who's going to do that? Oh, well, what does that have to do with us? Well, these are euro-denominated bonds. We want to convert them into euro-denominated financial instruments. We want them to convert them into the currency of your country. Well, but that's not. You're not part of our country. Who are you? We're Banco Santander, or we're Banco this, or that, whatever. We're a British bank. Now, this brings us to the question of derivatives. I don't know if people know this, but the hundreds of trillions, if not quadrillions, of nominal derivative activity 47% is run by 10 British banks. The next 25% is run by 16 U.S. banks, but most of that is run by 6 U.S. banks. So those 10 British banks and those 6 U.S. banks account for probably 70% of the derivatives out there. And then the rest is the rest. So you go back to your national currencies, or you implement Glass-Steagall in any one of these countries or in the United States, and that wipes the whole system out. That wipes these guys out. Because none of those assets can be converted into currency, because it'll wipe out all of their currency. It'll wipe out all the money, except for the money that's held in the commercial component of the financial system, which will be protected under Glass-Steagall. So this is the situation. Now, so that's just one example. Now, to give you a sense of what some of the top people in the financial world are saying about all of this, I'm going to quote from last week 2 statements, excerpts from 2 statements. One by the head of the World Bank, whose name is Zolik, and the other is the head of the European Monetary Fund, Mario Draghi. Now, Zolik wrote that Europe may be nearing a break-the-glass moment when one smashes the pane protecting the emergency fire alarm. If a crisis does occur, the European Central Bank may not have the ability to respond fast, fully, and forcefully because of the differences on the bank's board. A Greek exit would trigger a hit to confidence in other sovereign euro assets. Eurozone leaders may need to be ready. There will be no time for meetings of finance ministers to discuss the outlook and debate the politics of incrementalism. In panic markets, investors flee to safe assets, sparking other flames. Then Mario Draghi, who addressed the European Parliament, said, urging European political leaders to drop their differences and take bold action. He posed the question, can the ECB fill the vacuum of lack of action by national governments on physical growth? The answer is no. Can the ECB fill the vacuum of the lack of action by national governments on the structural problem? The answer is no. Without more aggressive action by the European Monetary Fund, 7 heads of state, the euro is being shown now to be unsustainable unless further steps are to be undertaken. Now, this is the head of the European Central Bank saying that unless you do something now dramatically, the European currency, the euro, is unsustainable. So that, when they say that, that means they're trying to scare everybody into going into the final bailout. Now, Obama administration, Timothy Geithner and Bernanke are putting massive pressure on Europe to come to an agreement on this type of bailout system. And what's happened is that there is a person who's been a stick in the mud to the whole thing, and her name is Angela Merkel. Now, Angela Merkel is the Chancellor of Germany, and she believes that this would lead to hyperinflation, and she believes that also Germany would bear the brunt of bailing out all of Europe. And so her answer and her solution to the crisis is cut. 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 Austerity. You must impose austerity. But whether she fully realizes that austerity is not sustainable or not, or whether she's using this line to be a stick in the mud in the whole thing while Germany prepares to go for the mark, I don't know. I don't know, and I don't know if anybody else knows. But she's been having all these visitors, and Cameron of Great Britain came to talk to her, and so on and so forth. And they're all trying to get her to agree to this super bailout and a change in the European situation so that they all come under one super fund, like a super Federal Reserve that can bail out, infinitely. And this is what the head of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, is calling for, what have you. But If the Chancellor of Germany, which is the most productive economy in Europe, is saying, no, we need to cut back, we need to have austerity, which everyone knows is politically not possible, then you have to ask yourself what gives here. But anyhow, this is where they're at. This is the situation where they're at. So then you had an article in the publication Die Welt, which is known to be, you know, kind of like a conservative state publication, middle of the road to conservative, you know, don't rock the boat kind of publication. And they had an article going into how Europeans who are planning vacations better take a lot of cash because the banks may be closed. And if you don't have a lot of cash, you should stock up on cash because there may be some transitional, some transition to some other currency and so on and so forth. So they're giving advice to the average people who don't have a lot, that they need to prepare for something. Okay, so this is in the Die Welt. Now, it also is the case that one half of the U.S. of major U.S. banks' portfolios are tied up in Europe, and are tied up in the euro. So the thing with the euro will smash the top U.S. banks. It'll wipe them out. So that's now a lot of people are wondering how Europe did not go under. Why we didn't have a total collapse of the financial system last week? Because there was a Spanish debt crisis that occurred. But it appears to me, and I don't have any proof, that the Federal Reserve has been buying massively euro futures. And that's kind of what's been holding the system up a little bit, is the Federal Reserve's buying currency futures in Europe, of euros. And now, now you have also emerging in Italy a Glass-Steagall movement, a movement to get the separation of commercial and investment. You have a similar movement emerging in Greece. The elections in Greece are the 17th or the 18th, and it's expected that the anti-memorandum, that is the anti-austerity party, will come out on top, Tsipras, and their leader is saying we're not going along. So this may be the beginning of the exit of Greece from the euro. So that's only 8 days away, 8 or 9 days away. So that's how close we are. And now you also have the Spanish crisis, which is huge. You have the government debt, you have the regional debt, and you have the banks holding financial instruments and real estate investments, and they are at least $1 trillion. The banks alone are at least $1 trillion in bad paper that they're holding. They're not dumping, and so the Spanish are saying, well, we're okay. The Spanish Prime Minister saying, yeah, we're okay. We don't need any money. And he just got orders from the British they better accept whatever funds they come their way, because the biggest bank in the British system is Banco Santander de Bilbao, which is the largest of the Inter Alpha banks, which is also the largest bank in Latin America. So the whole Latin American situation is tied into Banco Santander, which is connected very closely to the Royal Bank of Scotland. So this is a kind of a British thing. Now, so let's look at this timing question again. What happens when Europe goes? Where's Obama? Where's Romney? You're going to have a hard time finding them. It's going to be a lot like trying to look for Waldo in the Waldo puzzle. And what are people with investments going to say that lose all their investments? Once this happens, are they going to go around blaming welfare mothers and Cadillacs and big government for the collapse of their investments? No. They're going to want to know what to do. And then what is the senator or congressman in the U.S. going to say when they have to disconnect their phone lines and computers because of the avalanche of response to this financial crisis? What do they have to say? What are they going to come out and say to the people? What is Obama going to say to the people? What is Romney going to say to the people? Okay? And that comes, I think, before the convention. That comes before the Democratic Convention, which is the first of the two conventions. A few weeks later, the Republican Convention occurs in August. So this is where the LaRouche movement is situated right now in the U.S. We are going all out right now to get the Glass-Steagall measure introduced into the Senate at the same time that we expand dramatically the number of congressmen who will support the Glass-Steagall resolution in the House of Representatives. Now, the Glass-Steagall resolution is the only way to deal with the collapse initially, because what it does, everything gets wiped out, but you can protect the commercial part and keep that afloat while you move towards a credit system that can fund any infrastructure projects that will revive the economy. But you have no other option once this thing goes. You have no other option. You have to step in and wipe out, use Glass-Steagall to wipe out all this paper. And that's the British Empire right there. You just wiped out the British Empire. You wiped out the empire that has been running the world increasingly since the assassination of Kennedy or since the death of FDR. You wipe out that thing. You wipe it out completely. Once the United States adopts Glass-Steagall, every other country in the world will adopt Glass-Steagall. China already has their equivalent of Glass-Steagall. Russia's a different story. India's a different story. But the transatlantic financial, that's it. That's how close we are. So our job in the U.S. as a movement, we have the primary purpose, primary mobilization is to get Glass-Steagall implemented. And the more we build and the more support we get for Glass-Steagall, the more Obama goes down. Because his very existential sensibility is to stop Glass-Steagall. That's his, and also Romney. Don't think these guys are going to jump on the bandwagon. They might pretend that they are going to adopt it, but that's just a pretense. They are creatures of that empire. They are, and they'll go down with the empire. Okay? Now, so there is now reflection in the United States of fissures now beginning to occur along the fault lines in the political system, in both the parties, and especially in the Democratic Party. In other words, Obama and Romney have supposedly already secured the nomination for their parties. But in their parties, and especially in the Democratic Party, there's a huge revolt against Obama in the process of occurring, which is not yet fully surfaced. But we discovered it last week. We discovered that we knew it was happening, but we didn't know to what magnitude it was going on. There is a revolt. And so I'm now going to quickly go through the fissures in the Democratic Party, so you get a sense of, and then a little bit in the fissures in the Republican Party, so you get a sense of, here you have these two armies getting ready to go out there and run the whole, capture the attention of the whole society till after the elections. And there's fissures now, cracks beginning to occur, huge cracks in their structures. Now, I'll start with some anecdotal reports. The first one involves Keisha Rogers, who is a LaRouche activist who has run for Congress in the Democratic primaries in what is mostly a Republican district. And she won her primary in 2010 on a Save NASA Glass-Steagall impeach Obama, a Democratic vote. Of course, Democrats in Texas are not very happy with Obama, so that's not a hard thing to do. So this time around, she ran again, 2012, and the Obama people told the party that they had to go after her and run a campaign against her from the Democratic Party in the state and in the area where she operates from, in the counties where she operates from. And so they put somebody up, and this is not consequential. This race is not really politically consequential in terms of getting elected. But they put somebody up, and they went all out with the nasty LaRouche stuff and everything under the sun to say she's not a Democrat, there needs to be a loyalty oath. You can, she wants to impeach Obama, blah, 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 blah. And she won by 100 votes, but the number of voters who went out was very small. So they did succeed in discouraging people from voting on a mass scale, but it wasn't enough to have her lose the race. So she won the race. Now, the point is that the Obama forces wanted to make an example of her, and they wanted to be able to go around the country and say the LaRouche people can't, LaRouche people are not Democrats and so forth. They wanted to use this, and the people in the Democratic Party, of course, are under they're being mobilized to do this because there's a tremendous potential for Democrats to abandon Obama on a mass scale. So then I'll go to the second anecdotal report, and this occurred in Washington State. Last weekend there was a statewide Democratic Party convention, and we have a candidate who is running in the 9th Congressional District, where there's a Obama-like Democrat, or a neoconservative Democrat, I would put him, Adam Smith. And he's not loved by the people in his district, but nonetheless, Dave Christie, prior to now as a candidate, have been going to all the legislative district chapters of the Democratic Party in the state of Washington. And the Democratic Party in the state of Washington is organized according to legislative districts. So a legislative district is 2 representatives in 1 Congress. 46 legislative districts in the state of Washington. There are 46 Democratic legislative organizations, and the ones in the vicinity of Seattle, which is most of them, he's been going to them to speak at them, and he's managed to get a lot of them to adopt the Glass-Steagall resolution. But when he gets up to speak, first thing he says is we need to dump Obama, we need to impeach Obama, which doesn't go over very well, because outside they see the mustache on Obama and so forth and so on. So there's a lot of unrest is caused by this, and a lot of people get upset, and then there's contentious debates and so forth. This has been going on for about 8 months up until now. It's been going on for about 8 months. So he shows up at the conference as a candidate, and he gets to speak before the Foreign Caucus of the Democratic Party, state of Washington, and then he's asked to come to what they call the Progressive Caucus, which are more your progressive Democrats. And so he comes into this room. There's 150 people in the room, and they're all presenting the candidates and what have you. And then they're talking, and then there's some presentations, and then the moderator, the person chairing the whole event, says, "You all know me as the guy who's been putting these Glass-Steagall resolutions through the state legislature and the King County Democratic Party committee, etc. But I'm really not the origin of that. I have to tell you that Dave Christie over here is the one who originated all of this. In discussions with him, this is what we did." So now he's revealing that he's been talking to the LaRouche activist, and that the LaRouche activist is the one who motivated him to do all of the work to get the resolutions going in all these different areas. Number one. And, oh, Dave, we want you to come up and talk. Well, Dave was caught off guard. He was not expecting this. He was shocked. I mean, LaRouche, LaRouche is like a bad word in the Democratic Party. I mean, it's like, anyhow, I won't go into it. So anyhow, so Dave almost didn't know what to say, but he got up and said a few things. But the point is, why would they do that? Why would the Progressive Caucus do this? And why would the leader of the Progressive Caucus, one of the leaders of the Progressive Caucus, do this? It's because they're trying to make a point. And it would not have been a local decision to bring in a LaRouche guy and present him as the motivator of these policies. It's uncharacteristic in the extreme. So what is going on? Well, the Progressive Caucus is sending a statement, but it's not just them. It's coming from a national level, but it's hidden. But it's they're okay. You LaRouche guys, come in here and ding ding. You know, I mean, and so this is the kind of fissures that are going on, and knowing full well that Obama will send his henchmen in to go after these people, or his machine will send the people in. This is as we're getting ready to launch the full-blown part of the presidential. Whole chunks of the Democratic Party are trying to communicate that they are not for Obama, they're for Glass-Steagall. So now we found something similar in the Virginia State Convention on the same weekend. Instead, they were rallying around their senator, James Webb, around a resolution that demands that Obama not go out on these humanitarian adventures under the new policy of the Right to Protect and Atrocities Prevention Board, which is the global police, the global military, without congressional approval. So this is a direct attack on Obama, and he's being featured, and his resolution is being featured in this convention. And then in the same weekend, there was another Democratic Party state convention in Massachusetts, and the whole thing around Glass-Steagall took off, and we got all these signatures, but they gave us the wrong information on when to submit them, so we couldn't get it on as a resolution. But the woman who's running for senator against Scott Brown is using Glass-Steagall as her principal campaign policy in her campaign. So there is this process going on. So then articles start appearing in the blogs and in various press saying that Bill Clinton is trying to knife Obama in the back. That Bill Clinton is up to no good where Obama's concerned. He's supporting Obama, but he's really trying to wreck him. Now, so this is surfacing in the media, right? So maybe the Clintons are doing something here to destroy Obama. Maybe they see an opportunity for them to come in and take over as Obama goes under in the financial collapse. I don't know for sure, but I'm smelling that kind of thing going on. Okay. Now, and then we have a situation in another congressional race where we have someone running for the Democratic primaries in Detroit. His name is Bill Roberts. And the congressman has resigned from, he's not going to run after he's being investigated for petition fraud in Michigan. And so Bill Roberts is running against a guy named Taj Saeed. It's Saeed Taj, or Taj Saeed, I think. And the Democratic Party told Taj, do not confront Bill Roberts publicly on anything, especially on Glass-Steagall. don't attack him, just campaign and you'll get in. So, but Taj has begun to massively attack Roberts as an imposter, and LaRouche and all of this stuff. And so the articles are appearing in Detroit, Detroit area, saying that it looks like it could be possible that a LaRouche activist will get the Democratic nomination, and the guy who raises a Republican who raises reindeer and works as Santa will get the Republican nomination. Yeah, that's funny. Anyhow, and we're picking up a lot of things like this are starting to go on. Why? Because there is a sense that that Obama's going to have to be thrown overboard if the country's going to survive. And there is a sense developing. Now, I saved the most spectacular one for last. Okay, and now there was this article that appeared in the New York Times about giving all kinds of details about drone attacks and the president and drone attacks. Well, and there was another article that appeared somewhere, and I don't know where, that went into great detail about a cyber warfare that's being used by the United States against Iran. Mm-hmm. And there was another article that appeared somewhere about the United States foiling an Al-Qaeda attempt to blow up an airline. And then there was another, okay, now, big deal, right? Right? Well, it is a big deal because these revelations involve the leaking of national security, serious national security information, right? And you all remember Valerie Plame and Joe Wilson and Scooter Libby and Dick Cheney, right? You all remember that, right? That's what happened in that situation. Only this is like 3 situations. So what Obama's being accused of is leaking national security information to gain support for his image as being tough on terrorism, putting the national security of the United States in jeopardy. Now, this is serious. Okay, it may not seem serious to you or to me or to anybody else, but it is serious. And we now have the first bipartisan attack on Obama on an issue that up until now they would only be Republicans. It would be the Fast and Furious or some of the other things. But this is the first time a Democrat, a prominent Democrat, Dianne Feinstein, the senator from California, who's been really screwed over by Obama, by the way. I won't even go into the details. She's now backing getting a special prosecutor going. And while they didn't get a special prosecutor, they got two counsels now, two independent counsels, not a special prosecutor, but 2 independent counsels on this. Now, this is very serious because it is the kind of thing that you can get a bipartisan support for. Because in the mind of the military, in the mind of the institutions, when you have a president starting to leak national security secrets for purposes of political campaigning, you got a real problem. You got a very serious problem. You got somebody who's equivalent to treason in the government. So this is now surfacing now. Now, whether this is going to lead to his dumping him or not, it's just a manifestation of the growing rifts that are going on under the surface, and the fact that it's an election year and you have a senior Democratic senator going after Obama is also a sign of a rift in the situation. So now in the actual organizing that we're going out on the streets, and we find a very different response in the urban areas than we do in the more rural areas. It is not that the urban areas are fundamentally different than the rural areas. It's that the socialization in the rural areas is much more open. So you're getting a reflection more in the rural areas, more in the smaller town areas of what people really are thinking. Whereas in the urban areas, people kind of hold it in. They don't let you know what they're really thinking. There's more of a kind of a shell or a social distance. But in a town of 1,000 or 2,000 people, where everybody's social with each other, then you get a certain feeling about how people really think. And in those places, we go into a small town, we set up a tripod sign like this, or a huge sign saying, stop here to impeach Obama, stop here, or pull over to dump Obama, pull over to do this, and cars will start lining up. And some of those squads will raise $1,500 in a day. Sometimes, not up to $1,500. I think that's our biggest one. And people just come up and become members, get literature, and talk about it and discuss with us the things that they're discussing among themselves. In the urban areas, it's a little different. It's a more complex situation. It's not as friendly and as open as that. But there's got to be some of that stuff going on in the urban areas as well. Now, the plan of the British and their puppets and their minions, they do have a plan. They're not in this just to have this empire get wiped out. And we know that the Queen just has begun the year, the Diamond Jubilee year, which marks the 60-year reign of her depredations on the human race. And Prince Philip was in the hospital during this period. Anyhow, so what's the British plan? Yes, they have a plan. It is a military one. Their plan is a military one. That's it. It's not a financial one. Yes, we'll take it one more round in the bailouts maybe, and before it all goes, but their plan is a military plan. And besides resistance to their plan within the various militaries of the world under their control, especially the U.S. military, they have to get something going in the Middle East or Syria or Iran or something going. They got to get something going to get something going, to get a confrontation with Russia and China. They got to get something going, and they're trying very hard. And the person who's coordinating the overall strategy and is Tony Blair, and he's spending a lot of time now in Washington advising Obama. But the Russians and the Chinese are not budging. They're holding very firm. And the Russians have gone on the offensive. They're doing massive diplomacy around Syria. They're now calling for a conference of all the parties that they're going to hold, and they're going to put it on the internet and have the entire world listen to the various different sides of the Kofi Annan plan. That's aggressive. And they're doing a massive aggressive operation with Pakistan because the U.S. is, not the U.S., the British are backing the Saudi elements in destabilizing Pakistan, which has 175 million people. And the Russians and the U.S.-Pakistani relations are deteriorating massively. And the traditional relations, and the Russians are coming in to try to bolster Pakistan because they don't want a disintegrated Pakistan in the region. So the Russians are taking a very active role. And so I'm going to stop there. And if you want to hear the rest of this, you got to start coming to the meetings. They're held in Burnaby. The next one will be in 2 weeks on the 23rd of June. You're invited to come. and email me at Glumaz, Glumaz, gmail.com. You have the U.S. election a little less than 5 months away, and you have the Democratic Convention where it is expected that Obama will be anointed the candidate for the Democrats in a little bit less than 2 months away, perhaps 2 months away. That's a calendar time, otherwise known as clock time. Okay? Now, however, there's a different time which is creeping up very rapidly and is about to overtake the calendar time, and that is events, seismic events that disrupt all timetables, all calendar events. And that event is the systemic breakdown of the transatlantic financial system, and it's occurring now, and it's accelerating. Now, there is an absolute deafening silence over the situation that exists in the Obama camp and in the Romney camp. There's a deafening silence over the reality of the economic disintegration and the end of the existing financial system. Now, American electoral campaigns are long. They take a long time to build up, and by the time you reach this stage, you have an army of consultants and paid, corrupted politicians all lining up behind one or the other. Okay? And this army starts to grow exponentially as you go into the nominating conventions, and then it really takes off after the nominating convention. And these armies consume hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in advertising and under the table drug money, and it's a wild, it might be one of the largest service industries in the world. But anyhow, okay, this is the Saturday Vancouver meeting of the LaRouche movement. It is June 9th, Saturday, and if you want to hear the full presentation and the questions, you need to come to the meeting, and you need to find out where the meeting is in Vancouver. You need to email me or talk to somebody who's been at the meeting. You can email me at Glumaz, Glumaz, at gmail.com. Okay, so tonight I'm going to deal with a very controversial topic, a topic that most people have extreme difficulties with. It's the topic of time. And this is a very important topic right now because people have a sense of time which is based on calendrical events when the real world is operating on a very different time. And in terms of calendar events, you have these two massive armies being geared up to go into the election process. And so these two immense camps are going into battle without checking the weather forecast. And the biggest financial storm in world history will sweep these millions into disarray, which is now getting started. That process is now getting started. And they have nothing to say about it, and will not have anything to say about it. And that's the kind of situation that we're going into. And I'll come back to this in showing you what you didn't hear about in the United States that's going on. Now, the financial storm is not centered in Europe. It is centered in the entire transatlantic system, and the European part of it is the trigger at this moment. But it's not Europe, it's the entire transatlantic system which is going to go under financially. Now, I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Okay, you have a European country, name Greece or Spain or Italy or France or Germany, and let us say that the demands on those governments to cut their population's living standards is so great that it is politically incapable of doing so, as we saw in the Greek situation, or as we partly saw in the French situation. The pressure becomes one of how do we get out of this situation where we have to continually cut our population to the bone and thereby create unrest and instability in our population. Or, if we stay with the system and they go to the super bailout and you end up with the destruction of the currency through hyperinflation, it's the same result. Well, because the European nations are not a political union as yet, they are partly a political union, they don't have a Federal Reserve that they all subscribe to. They all have their own banks, they all have, and yet they have the common currency. So,